Okay, we should probably start. Good morning, everyone. This is a very informal meeting, but I'm really excited about doing this. My name is Jos Pauwelijn. I'm a professor here at the Graduate Institute and also at Georgetown Law School and the president of TradeLab. This is a TradeLab event. Welcome all of you in person. Mind you, this is also being live streamed on YouTube, and it will be available afterwards. Obviously, we want as many people as possible to follow what's going on here. I know most of you in the room know what TradeLab is, what we do, but just to be clear and for those online, essentially TradeLab is now a network of more than 15 universities, 15 different law schools, literally across the globe, from the Americas to Asia, Africa, India, Europe. And what we do is three things. One is with students, helping real beneficiaries, developing countries, NGOs, small businesses, help them with research, technical legal issues, policy questions related to global economic regulation. It started with WTO investment, but now it covers, as you will see in a moment, a wide range of issues. The second thing we do is to train students in a different way. To train students basically by doing a project, so learning by doing. And then the final objective, the third objective, is to make all the work all of these bright students have been doing publicly available on the website. TradeLab.org is where you'll find most of the memos that are being discussed now. I'll hand it over to Sarah Matthew, who's the TradeLab coordinator, to run the show. We are pressed for time, so I would urge everyone to keep to your time limit, because the objective is not to go into great detail of what you've been doing, but just to give people a sense of the kinds of projects that TradeLab has been doing. And hopefully some of you in the room or online will feel motivated to perhaps reach out to us and submit more projects. Sarah? I suggest we speak from here. We have 2 microphones. That should probably make it easier.
Thank you, Professor Pauwelijn, for the welcome and the introduction. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Yes, okay, great. Again, thank you for joining us this morning. As Professor Pauwelijn mentioned, I am the TradeLab coordinator, and I have been so for 2 years now. And one of the best parts about the work that I do is reading the projects at the end of each clinic and seeing all the work that it has to go through, but also reading the feedback that we receive from supervisors, students, and beneficiaries. Just a quick recap, since August 2018, we have had the privilege of training 165 students just in the space of a year, and this includes students from our pilot clinics as well. These 165 students worked on 44 different projects for NGOs, SMEs, international organizations, governments, etc. So the showcase is really a great way for everyone to learn how TradeLab works, the kind of projects we do, and of course to hear how these projects impact the beneficiary. And now we will hear from students of the Graduate Institute Clinic. I will ask Ines Fernandez and Nikki Komodaraki to start off the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you to the TradeLab for allowing us to present our project. I will talk about the project in itself, which, as you can see, it's called the Paris Accord-related Agreement on Environmental Goods and Services, its necessity and feasibility. I will also talk about the outcome and the takeaway for us from this project. And afterwards, I will hand it to my colleague, Nikki, and she will speak a bit about the impact to our beneficiary. So the project, as envisioned at the beginning, consisted in assisting the permanent mission of Taiwan, Penghu, Kinmen, and Matsu to the WTO by providing a confidential memo regarding the operational and legal aspects of a proposal that they circulated to the WTO Committee on Trade and Environment. This proposal envisages a comprehensive trade mechanism to facilitate the implementation of the Paris Agreement. They named this proposal a Paris Accord-related environmental goods and services agreement, or in short, PAEXA. So, however, as the meetings and discussions with the beneficiary went along, the project evolved from this confidential memo with the legal and operational aspects of PAEXA to an advocacy paper addressed to the general public and with the objective of promoting the importance of PAEXA. Due to this, our final outcome was this advocacy paper that argued for 3 reasons why PAEXA is necessary and 3 reasons why it is feasible. If anyone here is interested on the reasons, the paper has been published on the TradeLab website, so you can consult it there. In a sense, the initial legal and operational questions and aspects that were required were still in the paper, but they were framed in a way so as to attract the public attention and to advocate for PAEXA in an informed way. We think that our main challenge, and in this sense also the takeaway from this project, is this evolutionary aspect of this type of projects, which in our case required us to adapt quickly and in a significant way to the initial issues presented to us and how to frame it in a way that will fulfill the needs of the beneficiary. So now I will hand it to my colleague here, Nikki.
Thanks. So on the impact of the project to the beneficiary, as it was assessed by them about 4 to 5 months after the submission of the paper and the final presentation, it could be seen as twofold. First, it helped them to internally evaluate and improve their PAEXA proposals, and secondly, it maybe more importantly for them was the dissemination of the idea to the public. So on the first point, for example, the compilation of the ways to define the scope of climate-friendly goods and services helped them to add content and refine their proposal, see different options, evaluate the potential industrial impact, and so define their strategies better. And they also said it was helpful to discuss their idea informally with students who research in depth in their suggestion and see the direct, frank reactions to their proposal. And on the second impact point, for such a kind of beneficiary who is a state representative, maybe it was more important ultimately to have somebody from outside, so to say, as they said, provide thinking materials to call the attention of the public, to create a positive atmosphere that this is an imperative issue and it is feasible to address it. And for such a kind of advocacy paper, they were especially happy by the fact that the final presentation could be opened to the public because it gave them an opportunity to directly attract people to listen and learn their proposal and test the receptiveness and the reactions and see and exchange views with people other than the ones in charge of the clinic as well. And since this project involved controversial issues like climate change, government procurement, technology transfers, they were aware that it will not be a direct line to success of the PAEXA proposal, but it is important to clear the expectations of the beneficiary as well and towards us. And they saw it as a set of information and suggestions that could be a building block for further development of their proposal in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Inez and Nikki. Our next presentation is by Mohammed Bashir, Elena Bertola, and Florencia Sarmiento, who worked on a confidential project for a government beneficiary.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Florencia, and during this brief presentation, we're going to present with Elena the work that we did in the context of the TradeLab clinic, the two of us, with Mohammed. So our project consisted in advising a Latin American country on the terms of its model bilateral investment treaty. The outcome of the project was a handbook that contained valuable information and arguments to support the text of the treaty. So we also included an annex. We also included an annex with country profiles because we thought that this would be valuable information for our beneficiary, including whether the country, specific country, had a model BIT, what are the positions or concerns regarding ISDS, also special features of their treaties, and some additional comments. We also prepared a table with addressing the current status of the BITs that they had, and we specified the termination dates, the denunciation dates, and whether the survival clause was ended or the period of the survival clause ended or not. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to my colleague, Elena.
Thank you. So after our final submission, we have decided to start working on a non-confidential version of our project with the support of our academic supervisors and the consent of the beneficiary. The new version is called New Generation International Investment Agreements and Negotiators Handbook. Here, we analyze the provisions that are considered the most relevant in the context of today's international investment law. For each provision's analysis, we design a chart, as you can see, and then we delve deep into a detailed explanation. In the explanations, we tackle recent treaty-making practices, relevant recommended approaches by UNCTAD and other authorities, and we refer to essential case law. So we also highlight practices that should be avoided to preserve the state's interests and alternative approaches that negotiators may want to take into account in case of objections by the counterparties. The objective has really been to provide solid and powerful arguments to support the negotiators in the conclusion of the new agreements. So for us, the project has really been an opportunity to acquire a comprehensive understanding of the policy-making aspect behind the negotiations and adoption of new generation investment agreements. We trust this handbook will provide countries with a tool to conclude new generation agreements, to learn from past experience, to avoid certain mistakes and improve further. The project has really been dynamic, stimulating, and has evolved throughout these months, and it would not have been as such without the support of our academic supervisors, Professor Powell and Professor Zarbiev, and the support of the beneficiaries' proactive participation. And also we would like to thank Panos there for his precious support throughout this month of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Florencia and Elena. We now will hear from Walter Mandela, also from the Graduate Institute Clinic. Walter Mandela and his team worked on a project in French for a government beneficiary in the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to present the project that we did. But the project was confidential, so I'll be very careful not to reveal too much, but enough for you to go away with something. So the outcome of the project was a negotiation strategy for a country pertaining to the Continental Free Trade Area, particularly the protocol in services. So as you're familiar, you probably know that the agreement is now in force as of May 30th. And because the schedule negotiations are ongoing, the country needed some input in how best they can secure their interests. And that was the aim of the project, was to direct them where they have a comparative advantage and what they can focus on, but while also preserving where they need help. So it was an offensive and defensive strategy that we came up with. But we were focused on two sectors, which was the land transport and waste management. And the methodology that we used was we got relevant case studies where liberalization had taken place in these sectors, particularly in countries that they could relate with, so mainly African countries. And for waste management, we looked at Ethiopia, and we got best lessons learned that they could use in liberalizing the waste management sector. And for the land transport liberalization, part, we were able to get a very good case study from Uganda and Kenya in liberalizing the railway system. So the biggest takeaway from the project really was, for me, in my case, it was to get an avenue where I could put my energies and love for a continent that I come from. And these avenues are quite limited, to be honest. And so this project was really a time for me to feel like I'm making a direct contribution to improving things on the continent. So for me, it was personally very, very fulfilling, and it meant a lot to me. And then on the other side, we're able to learn how to present information. It's something you take for granted, but when you're doing a project of this magnitude, you're overwhelmed with the kind of information that you have in terms of data and also just the literature, and just to be able to package it into a form that can be consumed easily by governments that are not necessarily experts in the field that you're working in can be quite a challenge. And thanks to the Professor Pauline and Jost as well, we're able to package everything that we got in a way that's very consumable. And that's something that I guess I'll take with me and also use for the rest of my life. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Walter, for sharing your experience. Our last presentation from the Graduate Institute Clinic is by Gabriela Alcantara-Torres and Chania Panyakumpol.
Thank you, Sarah. So our presentation will be also kind of restricted because of the confidentiality of this project. And we had the opportunity to advise on give an insight on the SPS measures, the sanitary and phytosanitary measures that go beyond those provided for in the WTO agreements, but in this case in the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Agreement that was signed last year by certain economies in the Pacific region. And we basically decided to focus on 5 substantive areas provided for in the agreement that are risk analysis, regionalization, equivalence, transparency, and procedural issues. And further, we had to analyze some policy implications of specific issues such as halal, GMOs, and mad cow disease, so how these provisions in the CPTPP would eventually affect policy making in the, mostly the developing countries that are either in the CPTPP or wish to get into it. And then also we made an analysis on some specific countries and analyze whether their measures or some of their laws and regulations were in compliance with the CPTPP. And I'm going to hand it to Chania.
Thank you. Due to confidentialities, we'll be very brief about our findings. So what we found is that there's a lot more incorporations of WTO jurisprudence and the SPS committee guidelines and also standards from standard setting bodies as mandatories in the CPTPP SPS chapters. For example, we found a lot more specific on timing and on the duty to provide specific informations, and also shifting the burden of cost on testing for different parties. And we also saw a lot of omissions of the special and differential treatments for developing countries. In terms of impact, as Gabriela has mentioned earlier, we focus a lot on what is the implications for member country that's deciding to join the CPTPP agreements.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Gabriela and Chania. Our next set of presentations are by students from the University of Ottawa and Queen's University Joint Clinic in Canada. They could not be here in person, but that did not stop them. They have made videos since they were so keen to share their experience with us. Our first video presentation is by James Berg from Queen's University.
Hi everybody, my name is Jimmy Berg, and along with my partner Noreen Sadiq, we are with Queen's University School of Law, located in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. Our project was called the Regulation of Tobacco Trade at Akwesasne, and our beneficiary was the Akwesasne Nation. The Akwesasne Nation is an Indigenous nation that shares territory with the Canadian provinces of Ontario and Quebec and the US state of New York. And in addition to those three jurisdictions, the Canadian federal and the US federal governments are also implicated. Now, the nation has always had a strong history of tobacco trade and management of its own tobacco resource and industry. And in recent years, the nation accepted funding to create and enact the Akwesasne Tobacco Law. And the nation asked our team at Queen's Law to assist in the drafting of a regulation that would help to implement that law. The regulation would help to manage the internal tobacco market while also complementing the regulations of other jurisdictions around Akwesasne. The beneficiary was really pleased with our product, and one of the reasons was that we had extensive time and research to really dive into other jurisdictions and how they regulated tobacco, and we were able to spend time understanding the beneficiary's needs and wants, and we were able to analyze really in-depthly certain words and study the effects and the implications of those words. We were also able to rely on the principles of administrative law so that we could find a balance between a government agency, for example, the Akwesasne Tobacco Licensing Commission, and to make sure that this government agency had enough flexibility to operate smoothly, but not too much discretion to allow for arbitrary and unfair government decisions. And as a result, our proposal was well informed. We provided legally informed feedback to the nation's current regulatory environment, and we proposed the first regulation in a series of many regulations to come. And that provided the impetus and the momentum to the nation to continue with this great project. So as a result, I just want to say that Noreen and I are really proud and honored to have been a part of this great project, and we hope that the relationship between Queen's Law and the Akwesasne Nation will continue for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Just a few minutes ago, we heard from Walter Mandela from the Graduate Institute Clinic on his project that they did for a confidential beneficiary. After the project was over, the academic supervisors realized that there is more scope of research, and the second part of the project was passed over to the University of Ottawa and Queen's University Joint Clinic in Canada. So the next presentation will be by Carla Lessard. It'll be in French. Just a quick note before we go over to the next presentation. Recently, we have realized that there is a need for us to do projects in languages other than English. So over the past year, we have started to translate our documents and policies into French and Spanish so that we can cater to different beneficiaries. And this is something that we hope to do more of in the future. And now we will hear from Carla Lessard.
Bonjour, mon nom est Carla et notre bénéficiaire au sein de TradeLab, c'était le Sénégal. Nous avons travaillé en fait sur la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine en matière de commerce de services. Et cette expérience était vraiment intéressante parce que le commerce de services, règle générale, c'est vraiment difficile. Mais en Afrique, il commence à se développer en matière de services. Donc nous avons essayé de travailler le commerce de services avec également le commerce des biens, parce que les deux doivent être développés ensemble. Et ce qui était vraiment intéressant dans notre travail, c'est que c'est un travail continu. Donc, ce n'est pas un projet dans lequel on nous donne des directives et nous donnons un travail final, mais tout au long de notre travail, ce que nous avons fait, c'était rédiger certaines parties et le Sénégal commentait sur ce que nous avons écrit. Donc, il y a eu un dialogue entre le Sénégal et l'Université d'Ottawa pendant 2 mois complets, à toutes les semaines. Et parfois, c'est ça qui était intéressant, c'est nous étions sûrs que nous comprenions leurs besoins. C'était vraiment important de cibler leurs besoins, de comprendre leurs besoins. Et parfois, c'est un peu difficile pour les pays de faire du commerce international parce qu'ils n'ont pas tous les outils justement pour entrer dans les négociations. Donc, il y a eu beaucoup de dialogues en fait via WhatsApp, Adobe Connect. dans lequel il posait des questions un peu plus informelles, à savoir non seulement d'une manière théorique comment fonctionnent les négociations, mais plutôt d'une manière pratique comment commencer leurs négociations, où aller chercher. Et aussi, le Sénégal est un pays francophone et au départ, ils ont essayé d'avoir un contrat auprès d'un pays anglophone, mais en raison des barrières de la langue, ils n'étaient pas capables de comprendre justement le document. Donc, ce qui était vraiment intéressant avec l'Université d'Ottawa, c'est que nous sommes l'université a le côté civiliste et nous avons aussi le common law. Donc, le Sénégal est un pays civiliste et francophone, donc nous étions capables de comprendre ses besoins parce qu'en termes de droit, la terminologie n'est pas la même et les définitions ne sont pas la même. Donc, nous étions capables de cibler pour cette raison et également aller chercher de l'information qui était à l'extérieur du français. Parce qu'en français, il y a beaucoup d'informations, mais parfois nous trouvions l'information en anglais qui n'était pas traduite en langue française, dont le Sénégal n'aurait pas été capable d'extraire pour pouvoir l'utiliser dans sa table de négociation. Donc, c'était vraiment utile pour le bénéficiaire, mais également pour les étudiants, parce que nous étions aussi des gens qui parlent espagnol, français et anglais. Donc, nous avons travaillé notre deuxième langue qui est l'anglais, ou certaines personnes, leur deuxième langue qui était le français. Donc, c'était utile, en fait, pour et le bénéficiaire et l'étudiant.
Okay.
You could hear Academic Supervisor Anthony Van Duzer in the background. Just to summarize very quickly what Carla said, some of what she said that the beneficiary was extremely pleased that the project could be in French and even more pleased that the students were able to use reports and websites that were in Spanish, French, and English. And that's something that we also at TradeLab want to do more of. We want to use the language skills that our students have. The beneficiary was also extremely happy with the output at the end. Thank you. Our next video presentation is by Mark Carew, Bradley Doyle, and Spencer Malthouse from the University of Ottawa.
Okay.
My name is Spencer Malthouse.
And I'm Mark Carew.
And I'm Bradley Doyle, and we are the TradeLab group from the University of Ottawa.
So the project we were working on was developing and drafting an investment chapter of a potential trade agreement between Canada and the UK following Brexit. And the beneficiary we were working for was the Centre for Trade Policy and Law. And what they do is they work with governments to develop trade strategy. And the work they do is highly informed by both the policy of the governments and also the international trade kind of legal environment. So our project was very much informed by that as well, and it was a policy and law-focused paper which we ultimately ended up producing, and ultimately that informed the draft provisions that we wrote for the investment chapter.
And that blend of policy and law is really what drove our project. So we were tasked with drafting a investment chapter in a potential post-Brexit Canada-UK free trade agreement. To start, we looked at the policy factors that would influence both of the parties, Canada and the UK, in negotiating this agreement. And so we looked at the context of Brexit as well as the party-specific objectives to draft provisions and make predictions on what would be included in that agreement. And that the scope of the project was really broad. It was all of international investment law, which is a unique experience. So it's looking at policy and investment law broadly.
And then in terms of the benefits this brought to our beneficiary, the Center for Trade Policy and Law, they were able to take the framework that we built and they were able to bring that to their discussions with both Canadian and UK government officials. In fact, we as a group of students, we were able to present at both Global Affairs Canada and at the UK High Commission here in Ottawa. And those presentations were very well received and reflected very well on our beneficiary. The beneficiary also just benefited from having hundreds of hours of work from a dedicated team where we were able to kind of go back and forth with our beneficiary and see what areas needed to be fixed and what needed to be addressed. We also had an expert mentor that we were working under, so we were working under Professor Van Duzer at the University of Ottawa and got a lot of feedback in order to make sure that the work we were doing was at sort of a professional caliber level of work. And then from the students' perspective, it was just a great opportunity to work on international trade law in a practical way. A lot of what you learn in law school is very focused on the law, whereas this was a great opportunity to really focus on policy and politics and how that can inform these types of decisions. So I would highly recommend TradeLab to students, to beneficiaries, and to universities thinking about getting involved.
Great.
Thank you to the students and supervisors of our joint clinic in Canada for making these videos. Thank you. I now invite Hongyue Mao from the Georgetown University Clinic, who will give us an overview of all the 6 projects that were undertaken this past semester.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hongyue Mao, and as Sarah has said, I will be covering the 6 projects we have done for the last 4 months with the help of Professor Pauling, Professor Kuhlman, and Professor Hillman. Given my limited time, I will introduce each project very briefly. The first project is the project I participated in, which is to help Bitmall, a startup company, to establish its primary businesses. We wrote a guideline for the legal problems it might encounter and has encountered. The first problem is to choose a place to incorporate. We choose US, Switzerland, and EU because these places are cryptocurrency friendly, and it is a startup company dealing with cryptocurrency exchange for social good purposes. Then we suggested to incorporate as a nonprofit organization because of its social good purposes, and also other creative forms such as benefit corporations and hybrid models could be good options. It is likely that Bitmall would be classified as money services business, so they would probably be required to comply with the anti-money laundering regulations in multiple jurisdictions. The project I shadowed for is the modification of the international trade agreement making process within the UK. The group made several general modification suggestions. First, to codify trade agreement process, and second, to codify relationships with devolved administrations, and third, communication of best practice guidelines. They also made detailed proposals based on the 4 stages of treaty-making process: pre-negotiation, negotiation, approval, and post-ratification. Next one, I'm going to introduce the fishery subsidies. The group made several proposals in regard to these fishery subsidies because the current agreement on subsidies and countervailing duties is unworkable in the fishery subsidies context. First, they suggest that they should establish an enhanced notification and transparency regime. And second, there should be a law enforcement approach to regulating illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And third, they should be incentivizing collective action in response to fishery subsidy violations. We also have the project of suggestion for Afghanistan's accession commitments to WTO. So the group made suggestions from 3 aspects: SPS measures, market access, and dispute settlement and resolution options. They made case studies on each topic and made very detailed suggestions. For example, in the dispute settlement and resolution options, they suggest that that Afghanistan could participate as a third party to provide training and exposure to dispute resolution process instead of bringing claims in the first place. The next project I'm going to introduce is the suggestions for India's negotiation of economic integration agreements. The key recommendations given by the group is that India should develop a way of measuring trade volume, develop a single integrated website for relevant regulations, as well as pass the Data Protection Bill 2018 that is in line with the GDPR. Last but not the least is the reference guide for legal issues in Uganda facing social entrepreneurs. The group made a very comprehensive research guide for the social entrepreneurs who want to do businesses in Uganda. starting from formalizing a business, whether to register as a non-profit organization or a for-profit entity, the registration of the business, employment issues, and tax issues. So these are the 6 projects we have done, and they are, I only very briefly summarize them, and I suggest you to read the amazing memos we have made on the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Honkie, for taking the responsibility of summarizing all 6 projects and for representing the Georgetown Law Clinic. Next, we will hear from a few of our academic supervisors. If I could invite Professor Nedumpara from the Jindal Global Law Clinic to say a few words.
So thank you, Sarah. In fact, I wish that my students were here to make the presentation. So Jindal Law School has been associated with the TradeLab for the last 3 years. In the first year, we did a project on helping the domestic industry in filing a safeguard investigation. In the second year, we did a project on examining India's position with respect to investment facilitation agreement. In the third year, we examined the possibility of India actually concluding agreements with small economies, especially in the field of services. So we looked at how agreements can be concluded where only limited number of sectors can be included within the negotiation. This has got a practical relevance, and 2 Jindal students worked with 2 Georgetown students. We were immensely privileged to have Professor Just and then Dr. Aditya Mathu from the World Bank provide mentoring. That was significantly helpful. So this project, I think, came out with a very interesting and a very useful report. And I feel that the Indian government can actually use the report. Not only the Indian government, any country that is interested in negotiating an agreement with a small economy for that matter can actually take this particular template forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nedumpara. And now we have a surprise video from one of our clinics in Tanzania. So we have the academic supervisor, Zidatsi Makong, who will be telling us about their clinic. The Trapka Clinic used to be run in collaboration with Georgetown for 3 years, but this year they are running their first full-fledged clinic with 5 projects. Over to James.
Very warm greetings from Trade Policy Training Center in Africa, TRAPCA. We at TRAPCA are quite grateful to be part of the TradeLab network. And in the first instance, we wish to thank Graduate Institute as well as Georgetown University for having introduced us to the legal clinic, the ins and outs as to how it works. And we are really, really grateful for this. Now, giving an update on how far we are today, we have received a request, a very interesting request from the East African communities, also known as EAC. And basically the request is looking into us providing the pro bono services to carry out a research that looks into the cost-benefit analysis regarding the potential FTAs that the EAC may enter into. Worthy of mention is the fact that already there has been indications, or at least the EAC has received some communication from some countries outside of Africa, as well as free trade areas existing out of Africa for a potential FTA with EAC. Now, secondly, also the EAC is interested to pursue regional trade arrangement in the form of FTA. And again, there's this sort of interest on the part of the EAC too. Now, of course, recognizing that there are some capacity challenges within the Secretariat, TRAPCA was approached to help out and carry out the research, and again, on the pro bono basis. It is also important to bring to your attention the fact that TRAPCA, having been part of the TradeLab, has gone at lengths to try to ensure that the TradeLab becomes a core part of the curriculum. Now, what we have done at TRAPCA is to mainstream the TradeLab mode of study within our own curriculum. So whenever time we have a project, it will be delivered under a specific module, and then the efforts of the students will be recognized in respect of their grades. So we've done that, and our governance procedures have been fulfilled. Hence, we are quite happy that now we are able to be on board and ensure that the students get credit for the work that they have done. Now, coming to the project itself, we have, it's quite an expansive project in the sense that it requires us to carry out research in 5 respective areas. And by 5 respective areas, we mean that there's 5 FTAs, of which this cost-benefit analysis will have to be undertaken. Now, this is quite a lot of work, and what we have done, therefore, is to bring on board our students, and we have about 33 of our students, and these students have been divided into 5 groups. So each group will be dealing with a specific FTA. And so far, we are quite at an inceptional phase, and things are going well at this stage. It is also important to mention that we are quite grateful for the TradeLab network, because through SARA, we've been able to acquire mentors. So we have 5 mentors, very distinguished individuals, and we've been having the Zoom meetings and consulting with the students, and this has gone so well for us. Now, one thing to mention about this project is that the cost-benefit analysis will be looking into both the economic and the legal aspects. Now, the community, that is the EAC, is quite interested not only to look at the legal but also the economic aspects. Now, given the fact that TROPCA's master's program, the Master of Science program accredited by Lund, is such that it provides for both economic and the legal aspects, the students are well endowed with the requisite skills to basically go through and carry out the research as expected. And of course, we anticipate that we'll be bringing in a lot of experts throughout the research process writing, and these experts will help us a lot in ensuring that, at least particularly in the economic aspect of the papers or the research itself, that the students are able to address the very needs of the EAC community. So with this, we are very much indebted to the TradeLab, and we are quite grateful.
Looks like James got cut off right there. Thank you. We're very excited that TROPCA could run a full-fledged clinic this year, and we're even more excited to see what they have at the end of the clinic. I will now say a few words on behalf of the Qatar University clinic that is run out of Doha in Qatar. Currently, the students are working on a project for the Ministry of Municipality and Environment of the state of Qatar in context of the Paris Protocol for Climate Change, or otherwise known as the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement was adopted by 195 parties in 2015 within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The Paris Agreement aims for countries to deal with the impact of climate change and also to make finance flows consistent with a pathway towards lower greenhouse gas emissions and to create a climate resilient development. How does the Paris Agreement try to achieve this? They request countries to create, communicate, and prepare climate action plans that are also known as nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. And these NDCs have to be reported every 5 years to the UNFCCC Secretariat. Coming back to Qatar, the state of Qatar has ratified the Paris Agreement, and dealing with the impact of climate change is also on their agenda and one of their objectives of their national vision. They're also in the process of developing their NDCs. The project by the students, they look at the effect of the Paris Agreement on trade and investment policy and vice versa, which is also quite important given the economic blockade that they are facing right now, the land, air, and sea blockade that was initiated by a few countries 2 years ago, which is also impacting their ability to deliver on the NDCs. Just a quick example, Qatar Airways, which is the national carrier of Qatar, they are forced to fly much longer routes since they are unable to use the airspace of the United Arab Emirates, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, which leads to an increase in CO2 emissions. This is just one of the many ways that that the blockade has affected Qatar from an economic perspective and also an environmental one. So given this context, the students are looking at how the NDCs can be modified and also trying to highlight how trade and investment policies can be modified to accommodate the new NDCs. And once the project is completed, the students will be making a presentation to the Ministry of Municipality and Environment with their recommendations. Thank you. Back to our student presentations. We now have students from the University of International Business and Economics in Beijing. I invite Bin Zong and Juan Tang to share the findings of their project, which was related to the reform of state-owned enterprises in China.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tang Juyuan. I am representing the Team 3 of UIBE pilot project. Our beneficiary is China's Chamber of Commerce, and our project is an empirical study of state-owned enterprises in the US, EU, and Canada during the GATT time. We know that state-owned enterprise is a sensitive issue at present. But is it unique for China? Nearly every country had SOE in different historical stages. Maybe China is just repeating others' history. Our beneficiary realized this possibility, so they requested us to find out, and we give them a satisfactory answer. For us, the most difficulty is to find a suitable analytical approach. We're facing tons of materials. We also struggled for months with using Federal Register to locate relevant cases of near 200 ones. Our conclusion is that the steel industry was heavily subsidized from 1960 to 1980s, where SOE played an important role. In order to secure their international market, the US took aggressive countervailing measures against virtually every major steel producer around the world. That's exactly a trade war. Going along this path, we selected 4 cases to examine how SOE could contribute that trade war and summed up US positions toward this problem. As expected, our research is helping beneficiaries to better understand US policies on SOE. And after this project, we received many requests from scholars, companies, and even government agencies. Now, I will give the floor to my teammate, Song Bin. Thank you all.
Thank you, Juan. It is a great honor to be here representing UIBE. I would say that the most gains are the improvement in research and legal skills, as well as our strong commitment to the team. Although we finally made the project, but we still have some regrets. You know that 3 months are too short to run a TradeLab project like ours. Besides, we should have spent more time with our beneficiary from the beginning so that we can get on the right track sooner. But all this could be the lessons for our university's pilot projects maybe next year. I would say that TradeLab is a great project and our experience is gorgeous. So we have benefited so much from it. Thank you, TradeLab. Thank you. Now I give the floor to Team 1 and Team 2.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Juan.
Thank you all. We are here. I'm from the Team 1, and these 3 gentlemen and lady are from Team 2. Our project is about the United States concerns on the WTO's appellate body, precisely 3 concerns. And our work is to give them a proposal to reform the appellate body. And I think what most important in our work is we discovered the interactive influence among these 3 concerns upon each other. So that really impressed our beneficiary a lot. And the most important idea is of our work is not just good for our proposal. It's not just good for China. It's also in favor of all the WTO members. And this topic is not fresh anymore. But when we got this job from our beneficiary, it was still a cutting-edge issue, and we just wired in massive cases and materials at the beginning. But thanks a lot to our to our supervisor, Professor Matthew Kennedy. He really helped us out of the woods. And for me personally, I think the most important thing I learned from the TradeLab is it's really inspired me to pursue academic life. I always have strong interest on academics, and it gives me a lot of inspiration, like how should we deal with the de facto binding precedent in almost every international tribunal? What can the multilateral investment court learn from the WTO if they are going to have a appellate body too? So all these things make the TradeLab a very wonderful experience for all of us, and I want to thank Professor Pauling for your kind invitation, and thank our professor for your hard working. Now, hereafter is my friends in Team 2, Ziyu Wang.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wang Ziyu. I'm representing Team 2 from UIB. Our beneficiary is the same as Team 1, and our project is also related to Team 1. We focus on creating a substitute mechanism in the absence of WTO's appellate body. Not only did we stick to DSU Article 25, which is actually very popular now, we also went further to design this so-called appeal arbitration working procedures, namely AA working procedures. These model procedures remain innovative even on today, since there are very few proposals like ours so far. Maybe this is the reason why our beneficiary is so impressed by our outcome. When we visited them, they said our research outcome was far beyond our expectation. In particular, they spoke highly of our AA working procedures, regarding them as essential factors to make DSU Article 25 feasible and workable. They confirmed that our contributions would greatly help their further policy making. Eventually, they expressed a great interest in further cooperation with UIB Law School on TradeLab project. So that's all. Thank you. Now I give my floor to my teammate Gu Chunxiang.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gu Chunxiang, a member of Team 2. As already indicated by Ziyu, our major contribution is the AA working procedures. I was actually merely responsible for this part. To me, it is certainly the most meaningful experience in my legal study. Having engaged in this project, I have become more confident in expressing myself without the fear of making mistakes. This means a lot to me. Serving the beneficiary has also given me a strong sense of accomplishment. You all know that feeling, right? Like, oh yeah, I can do it too. Even I am on the way to being a wonderful lawyer. That's the most encouragement. Last but not least, I really appreciate this learning by doing opportunity. Thanks for Professor Pauling, Teresa, and Sarah. I wish the friendship between UIB Law School and TradeLab will last forever. Thank you. Now I give the floor to my teammate Li Haoen.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Li Haoen, and I'm also from Group Team 2, but I do feel like we cannot be isolated from Team 1. We two teams are actually connected to each other since we serve the same beneficiary, serve the beneficiary and with the project related, and we had helped each other ever since. We also sat in Professor Kennedy's class, and we helped each other, and we had more chances to exchange ideas, to share experience, and develop friendship. So, I mean, the success is not only attributable to ourselves, but also to our brother team. We believe learning and practicing, as emphasized by TradeLab, do help us to come to this conclusion. Not to mention that we have harvested knowledge, skill, and friendship. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you to Professor Gong and to all the students who have come all the way from UIB Beijing to join us at all the TradeLab events. Thank you again. Now we will hear from some of our newer clinics. Actually, I'm pleased to announce that yesterday the TradeLab General Assembly met and we admitted 3 new members into the TradeLab network. We admitted the National University of Singapore, Monash University, and Hebrew University. And now we've grown to 13 clinics, and we have about 4 pilot clinics who will also apply at some stage after they finish their pilot clinics. And they all undergo a very thorough vetting process by the TradeLab Executive Committee and the General Assembly. We will first now hear from Dr. Berman, who's the Academic Supervisor of the National University of Singapore Clinic. They worked on 2 projects in the field of international investment law. Dr. Berman will tell us more.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm really sorry our students couldn't be here. Next time we'll do a recording, I think, or we'll get them to come over. So I'll keep this really short. We had 2 projects. This was our pilot clinic. One project was for the Ministry of Foreign Trade of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So essentially, they're a candidate to become EU members. And after that CAMIA judgment, they were concerned that the European Commission would require them as a requirement to join to terminate their BITs that they have with EU member states. So they basically came to us asking, what do we do? How can we terminate these treaties? But at the same time, we don't want to hurt our investors. So what are our options here? So basically what the clinic did was we looked at the termination options under the Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties, the unilateral termination options, the mutual termination options, and what consequences that would have for the sunset clause, so for the continuing protection of investors after termination. The students also looked at what kind of investor rights there would be, whether they would have other claims. Investors, maybe they have direct rights, maybe or they have derived rights, and if that would be a source of them to bring claims in case of termination. I think overall, the major impact of this project was that really Bosnia and Herzegovina, they took this report with them to discussions with the Commission. So they really had kind of an overview of what the option would be going forward. The second project was for the Philippines Investment Board. They're involved in different negotiations, most notably with RCEP, and they were concerned that there is a trend of including prohibitions on performance requirements in treaties, such as in CPTPP and the USMCA, and that would be a demand going forward. So they kind of wanted more or less a primer on prohibitions on performance requirements. They wanted to understand historically whether some of the developed countries had used performance requirements in the past, and then what kind of prohibitions there currently were, and what their consequences would be, and whether there would be exceptions or carve-outs that they could then use in their negotiations. So I think generally the impact was that we gave them kind of a background document on which they could develop their negotiation position going forward. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Berman. So our clinic at Monash University, they actually ran 2 pilot clinics in the space of a year. And now we have Dr. Caroline Henkels from the Monash University Clinic who will give us an overview of both clinics.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Monash is absolutely honoured to have become, as of yesterday, a full member of the TradeLab network. As Sarah said, we've now run 2 clinics. The first one was in the second half of 2018, and the second one has been completed just this week. So first I'll talk about our first round of clinics. We had 2 teams of students. The first team was working with an NGO that consults to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And their task was to examine the domestic laws of a number of sub-Saharan African jurisdictions and determine the extent to which those laws, which concern public-private partnerships, comported with the Addis Ababa Action Agenda for financing for sustainable development. The students wrote a report, but their major output was actually the development of a database of legislation, which is hoped will be then used as the basis for a larger database that can be used by UNCTAD in the future. Their overall conclusion was that there was a low level of compliance with these principles of sustainable development. Now, the second group did a project that related to one of the Graduate Institute projects that we've already heard about concerning the CPTPP. Again, our aspect of the project was confidential, so I can just tell you a little bit about it. We analysed the technical barriers to trade chapter, and in particular, the students looked at the provisions of the TBT chapter that imposed obligations that went above and beyond what's found in the WTO agreements. Their main conclusions were that most of the new obligations were procedural in nature, but there were some substantive obligations that had the potential to be quite onerous for member states of the CPTPP, which I'm sure was very useful for the NGO in terms of their advocacy work. In semester 1, 2019, which we're just completing, students have completed 2 related projects. The beneficiary was an intergovernmental organisation, and the work was done in respect of 2 developing countries. So in respect of each developing country, the students analysed legislative reform proposals for their compatibility with WTO law, relevant preferential trade agreements, investment law, and surprisingly for the students, the constitutional and administrative law of those jurisdictions. So the students found that very challenging, but they have also found it very rewarding, and they're just finalising their memos this week. So those were Monash's projects, and we look forward very much to our future work with TradeLab. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Henkels, and welcome to the TradeLab family. Our next presentation and our last presentation is from one of our newest pilot clinics at the University of Los Andes in Bogota, Colombia. We will now hear from Sebastian Vallejo, the academic supervisor, and Santiago Wills, the mentor of the project. Pascal, no audio.
And lecturer at Los Andes University here in Bogota, Colombia. I have been mentor in TradeLab projects for the YELPO program in the past and for the University of Qatar. I recently participated as mentor for the TradeLab pilot at Los Andes University here in Colombia.
Hello, my name is Sebastián Vallejo. I currently work with the Colombian government at the International Legal Affairs Office of the Ministry of Trade, and I participated as main lecturer for Los Andes TradeLab pilot. In this opportunity, a group of 5 students studied the applicable international trade regulation, both at a multilateral level as well as on a bilateral level, and analyzed Colombian domestic import and export regulations in order to help a local SME called Velino Gourmet, who was our beneficiary, to develop export opportunities of its products with special regard to the Peruvian, Chilean, and Panamanian markets. The report dealt with the application of multilateral and preferential trade rules in a comprehensive manner, and provided students with a real-life opportunity to study and apply the trade agreements negotiated by Colombia.
At Los Andes, we're very proud to have hosted the first Latin American TradeLab pilot during this first semester of 2019. We believe it was quite a success, both as a program for the university and the students, and for the beneficiary from whom we have received very positive feedback. We thank TradeLab for this opportunity to host the pilot program, and we look forward to keep consolidating TradeLab in the Latin American region.
And just to add, their project will be in Spanish. We have done a handful of projects in Spanish, and theirs will add to it as well. And that brings us to an end of the showcase and the presentations. And does anyone have any questions or comments or remarks? Teresa? Oh, yeah. If anyone has any questions or any observations, any comments, we all finished on time, so we have, everyone stood to their time limit.
Thank you, Sarah. I've been sitting here for the last, 45 minutes or something like that, or watching the presentations, and I think it's really extraordinary to see what has been able to be done, the types of projects that are being done, and the extraordinary amount of work that is being put into this. It's a testament to Joost, to Sarah, to Teresa, but also to the professors and students that are involved. I'm excited about being part of it myself, but also just I realize how much bigger it is than what we're actually doing with my colleague Nicholas Lamp at U of O in Queens. It's an extraordinary opportunity for the students, but also I think for all of us to benefit from this. And I think this showcase is an ideal opportunity to see what's going on, because we just wouldn't know otherwise. But I want to congratulate all the presenters today. I really I'm blown away by the level and the volume and the type of work that's being done. It is a real honor to be part of it, but a real honor to be able to participate here this morning. So congratulations to everyone.
Hi, my name is Rodney Neufeld. I'm a lawyer with the Trade Law Bureau in Canada, for the Government of Canada. We're a beneficiary, common beneficiary of the projects. So we've received projects in both French and English for the last, I don't know if it's 3 or 4 years running, but usually a couple projects a year. And it's always a lot of fun. We work mostly with Ottawa U or the joint clinic, Ottawa U and Queens, kudos to the supervisors, because their hands are absolutely full. In fact, I didn't realize until today with Tony's voiceover at the end of that video just how many projects that poor man is supervising. And I recall Walter's comment and Bin's comment. I think that's good advice from students who said that, look, you're very quickly overwhelmed with the amount of information, overwhelmed with the lack of time that you have to produce something, and the advice that Ben gave about meeting early with the beneficiaries. I thought that was really solid advice. Having the students in early to craft something is really important. We've learned from that, because it's key to not bite off more than you can chew, and pick a project that is nice and tight. This year, the multilateral investment court was a biggie. Last year, we had sort of inconsistencies in investment law, which allowed students to sort of pick and choose a little bit more, which is a good topic to pick. But the advice from students going forward is something that the individual project should build on, and I think every year the TradeLab project only serves to get better and better and better as you learn from past successes, of which there are clearly many, and past failures too, and that's obviously part of the program. That's quite okay. One last comment. Maybe this sounds a little crass, but working for the government and for an employer, we have self-interest in participating in a project like this. We hire summer students every year, and many of those summer students go on to become lawyers in our offices too. So there's a very self-interest in us being the beneficiary of these projects as students come to us. So I hope that message resonates as well. Thanks.
Thank you. And now Panos, who's been the teaching assistant for TradeLab clinics, will tell us what it takes to be a TA and the kind of work involved and how much goes behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, sorry, that was very impromptu, but so a TA is essentially the helping hand of the students. So the TA is present from the beginning of the project till the end of the clinic. And in a way, at least in my case, I was acting as the middleman. I was liaising between the students and the beneficiaries. I was helping the students in terms of communicating with the beneficiaries, because I think it's also very important to be able to communicate well with the beneficiary to understand the mandate, and for the beneficiary as well to understand what it is that you can provide. And so the teaching assistant is essentially the person who facilitates this communication. Moreover, the teaching assistant can also act as a mentor of sorts. Some projects have mentors. Other projects have mentors who are less available. So the teaching assistant, to the extent that he or she he or she has knowledge in terms of the substance of the project, can perform that kind of work as well. It is a very demanding kind of task, but it's also very fulfilling. It's very fulfilling to witness the development of the students of the projects from the beginning, from scratch, to a very complete memo for a beneficiary, for a real-life beneficiary. So yes, it is. It has been an honor. It is also very interesting to witness the degree of satisfaction that the beneficiary itself ends up receiving from the project. We saw, at least in the case of a graduate institute, a number of very, very positive comments. Unfortunately, we cannot share too much, but we have received even formal letters from certain governments congratulating our students for their work. So that's very fulfilling, and it's a pleasure to witness from the beginning to the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Panos, for doing that impromptu. Do we have any other questions or comments?
So I just wanted to mention something which I noticed really over the past year. At Queen's, we've now participated in the joint clinic for the second time. And so one of the additional benefits which Joost didn't mention, which is maybe a fourth benefit of the TradeLab project, is that it's really a catalyst for the university to build relationships with society at large. I just want to give an example. In our case, I supervised the project with the Aquasasne community, which was mentioned by Jimmy. And that was, of course, a very sensitive issue in Canada. It's always we have to treat very cautiously if you want to work with an indigenous community. And because I had this interest, we have some ties with the Aquasasne community, but I had this interest in doing a project for TradeLab. But of course, I can't go there and just say, okay, we have this interest, we have this structure, we have this course, we want to do a trade-related project. We had to kind of build a broader relationship and see, okay, how can we as a university, as a law school, assist you? And so what they had to do in order to get this TradeLab project, we had to establish a panoply of research projects which would really respond in order to really respond to their needs. For example, child welfare was actually more of a priority for them. And so I got my colleagues on board and tried to, and had them brought representatives of the community to Queen's, and got these other projects going as well, so that our project would be embedded in a broader relationship with the community. And I think that's, and that is now growing. And so it was really the TradeLab project which was the catalyst for that, but we're now building this relationship. And the second example that I wanted to mention is that we have been working with the East African community as well, and they have agreed to take 2 of our students as interns this summer. And our hope is that our students will go there as interns and then come back and do a TradeLab project for the EAC, and of course know the organization much better. And so this is really something which is, I think, fantastic for the university to be more deeply embedded in not just Canadian society but also world society through these links.
Thank you, Professor Lam.
Thank you. My name is Xu Xing. I come from Shanghai University of International Business and Economics. So first of all, I should say thank you for Professor Joost Pauwelin and your team. Before we start, my colleague asked me, do you know Pauwelin? And I said, I know him, but he didn't know me. And I cited many of your articles when I do my doctor paper, so thank you. And second, I should say thank you for all the presenters for your exciting work. And finally is my key question. So to be honest, it's my first time to know this TradeLab works project. So can we just ask, is it open for all the universities, or so can our students in my university apply for this project? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So how it works is when an institution is interested in becoming a member of the TradeLab network, they first have to approach the executive committee for approval to run a pilot clinic. And the executive committee will go through the guidelines that we have formulated to first decide whether a pilot clinic can be run by the interested institution. And there are various aspects and factors that we look into. And then if the executive committee does give you approval to run a pilot clinic, then after the completion of the pilot clinic, an application will be made formally to the executive committee by the institution, and the executive committee and the General Assembly will do a very, very thorough evaluation of the pilot clinic, and then deliberate. So there are very, very strict guidelines in answer to your question. Yes. Any other?
Thank you. My name is Julien Sylvestre Fleury, and I work with the Canadian mission here to the WTO. My question pertains to what kind of services or help the TradeLab could provide to countries that are seeking accession to the WTO. We've been approached by some of those countries asking, do you know of any programs where we can get some help? And yeah, this is my question.
Thank you. Perhaps I can answer that one. So in the past, we've actually done projects helping countries who want to accede to the WTO. So last year, we did a project for Somalia, helping them draft the initial report that they have to submit before membership. Plus, I think one of the student groups mentioned that as well. Not all of the TradeLab projects are long memos. It could be very discrete tasks. So we helped draft the speech, for example, of the trade minister of Somalia for the MC11. So yes, this can definitely be done. And actually we see it quite often that countries like Canada or the US or the EU, they're in touch with countries who want to accede or have specific needs. But of course, EU as Canada cannot start advising a country on accession because there's a conflict potentially. So this is the kind of work that TradeLab can easily do. And students have the energy, the time to delve deep into what these countries are doing locally, the local legislation, and then to look at what other acceding countries have done in terms of getting into the WTO. So in Geneva this year we did in Georgetown, we did something for Afghanistan. Because once you're in the WTO, it's only the first step. Then you have to ask yourself, what can I now do being a WTO member? But yes, definitely, this is something we could help you with.
Thank you. I think we have time. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Soledad Leal. I recently joined the center as visiting research fellow, and I am a former trade negotiator from Mexico to the WTO. I would like to add my voice to the ones who have congratulated all participants of the TradeLab. And I would like to highlight the value that your work has in terms of policy analysis and policy making. As a former trade negotiator, I can really see the contribution that you students can make in order to inform governments, NGOs, and other interested parties in making better choices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you. We have time for one last question/comment.
Thank you very much. Sergey Tim, WTO Expertise Center from Russia. We have got questions from how to be part of this TradeLab project as a student, but what about how to be part of this TradeLab project as a beneficiary, or how to become a beneficiary, and to whom we need to address a question, if there is any, and how to become beneficiary.
So there's the website is there, tradelab.org, and you can send questions directly on the website. Plus, more easily is to contact any of the supervisors or to email the coordinator, and questions can be asked, as many of the students have indicated, in a very confidential way or publicly, in the sense that We can keep the name of the beneficiary, the eventual work we do confidential, but we have a very strong preference to then make the work public so that others can benefit from it. But the best way is to just contact us directly. I'd be happy to talk.
There are no any kind of requirements. I don't know what's procedures to like. There is a list of beneficiaries that you work in, or it's just open to.
So, TradeLab is a network, and we have different clinics. And I think every clinic at this stage is evaluating the projects coming in, as Nicholas was mentioning, the kind of expertise you may have, the interests that you have, and select on that basis. But obviously, a core requirement is, let's do work for beneficiaries who don't have access to these kinds of resources, without excluding, for example, in the case of Geneva, but also in Canada and Georgetown, local beneficiaries who may have eventually some resources to do the work. But for example, to work for the government of Canada is very interesting for Canadian students to do, to build a network, and for the Canadian government to reach out to students. So we don't have very strict criteria in that sense on purpose, and leave quite a bit of flexibility to the local clinics to decide.
Thank you.
I would also like to take this opportunity to mention very briefly two other clinics. One is the Hebrew University Clinic that was just admitted as a member yesterday. They have worked on 5 projects in about 18 months with about 20 students, confidential and non-confidential projects, and their projects have been a success. And another one of our newest clinics is at the University of the West Indies, that's run out of the Cave Hill campus in Barbados, where Dr. Yaniv Remy is a supervisor, and they've just completed their clinic where they worked on 3 projects for beneficiaries from the Bahamas. Before we end the session, I would just like to thank every one of you, the entire TradeLab network. Whenever we send out requests for mentors or requests for any assistance, we always receive a lot of help, and I would just like to thank you for your support. And secondly, just to quickly thank CTI and the Graduate Institute for letting us host all the TradeLab events here, and for all the technology help and all the logistical help. Thank you. And now I invite Dr. Teresa Carpenter, the Executive Director of CTI at the Graduate Institute, to deliver the closing and remarks.
So I have some scribbles, so I'll just talk from here. So thank you. Sarah has asked me to make some closing remarks. Thank you, Sarah. So first of all, I add my congratulations to everyone that's in this room, to everyone that has participated in today's showcase, and to the projects over the past year, and also the projects over the past 10 years, whether that's students, academic supervisors, mentors, and teaching assistants. I know how hard all of you work in those capacities. It's quite hard to wrap up after hearing from such brilliant people and such amazing projects, but I thought, since Sarah asked me, it might be useful to reflect on the past, present, and future of TradeLab. So the present's really easy. You're here, a network of TradeLab, a network of law clinics across the globe doing very high quality original work for real beneficiaries. But it wasn't always like that. So it was always high quality and always original. Each project is unique. But what is different now is the scale. This network of now 15 universities is much bigger than when we started. It started 10 years ago when Joost arrived at the university and the Graduate Institute founded the Center for Trade and Economic Integration, and I first met Professor Paulin, and he said, I want to start a trade law clinic. So I said, what's that? As a meager economist, I had no idea what a law clinic was, let alone a trade law clinic, so of course I got educated, and based on an idea of his and Sergio, the co-founder of TradeLab. And so we started small, and the first law clinic began in 2008. Then we applied for funding. I will cut the very long story short, but the role of the TradeLab coordinator is funded via research funding, and we are blessed to have Sarah doing an absolutely brilliant job. But I asked myself about the future of TradeLab, sustainability and growth, and I wonder, what will TradeLab look like in 10 years' time? because every time a research project finishes, we look for new funding and so on. And I asked myself, what is the vision for TradeLab? Will it one day be the case that every university that teaches international economic law has a TradeLab? I don't know. I'm not actually going to attempt to answer that question, but what TradeLab will be in 10 years' time is going to depend on the actions of many different people, and I have a few reflections on that for people as they go forward. So students, as you go forward in your careers, please keep a couple of things in mind in relation to TradeLab. So the first thing is, keep in touch. Let TradeLab know where you are. And the reason for this is very simple. Universities care about their alumni, and the academic supervisors within the universities, some of them actually have to fight to get resources for the teaching assistant, for legal training, or something like that. So knowing where TradeLab alumni have got to is incredibly useful for the academic supervisors in making sure this course can continue to go on and helps them fight for resources within their universities. The second thing, if you go into government, you TradeLab alumni, or you're going to become alumni as you graduate. If you go into government and your manager asks you an interesting but straightforward sounding question that's going to take a lot of time, energy and resources to answer, consider asking TradeLab. You know how it works, you know what can be done, and you could advocate for that. And that's a win-win situation. And that's a general message. Always go for the win-win as you go forward. If you've got a difficult question that you can't answer, you might be able to surprise your manager by bringing these resources back. Third thing, I missed a number. So third thing, if you join a law firm, consider partnering your law firm with a local TradeLab clinic to do an event. That can give publicity for your law firm. It can be helpful and supportive to that local clinic. So just keep the TradeLab in mind. The fifth one, consider becoming a mentor. The sixth one, if you do become one of the 1% of incredibly wealthy individuals looking for something to do with your money, then consider TradeLab on your list of potential donations. Why not? Why not? And then the final thing is, tell us of developments to your project if you know about them. When we talk to potential funders, they want to know, well, okay, you've had a nice activity, you've done a law clinic, there are lots of useful inputs, there's all this time and so on. We've got an output, which is the report and goes on the website, but what's the outcome and the impact? So if you know, going forward, if you hear of something, get back in touch with TradeLab and say, oh, by the way, that study we did, that model BIT or whatever, oh, it has become adopted or something like that. So get back in touch and tell us. And the same thing comes for beneficiaries. If there are current or potential beneficiaries in the room, tell us of developments as you go forward. It sounds like there are letters coming in. That's all very useful. Keep that coming. And then bring a new project to TradeLab, because one thing for the future is TradeLab depends on having a constant stream of projects to do. Every year, it's not like rolling out a university course that has been run for the past 10 years. Every year, 5 new projects are needed at the Graduate Institute, 5 new projects in Canada, and so on. So if you are a beneficiary and it's worked well, think about how to do another project. And finally, I just want to close by saying what a pleasure and privilege it has been over the past 10 years to have played a role in this development of TradeLab. And I wish everyone all the best of luck as we go forward. Thank you.